Hey guys, welcome. Louis Balla here at Nuage, joined by my partner in crime, Glenn Saunders, who's going to be talking to us about all things MRP. Glenn, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on here.
You got it. Well, I want to start, and I think MRP has quite a few misnomers, hot in the zeitgeist. Really want to talk about how you utilize NetSuite MRP. Could you walk us through just kind of some of the core capabilities of NetSuite that support MRP, and maybe talk through how they integrate with other business functions for organizations?
Absolutely. So it's all around material resource planning. So helping organizations understand their supply chain, understand demand, whether that be make to order, make to stock, based on future demand, expected demand, or based on historicals. And then laying out a supply plan that says when you need to order product, when you need to make product, based on lead times, a variety of other factors. As schedules change, it can make suggestions, inventory allocations that may get reallocated for hot orders. It really encompasses everything from a supply chain management standpoint to help organizations better manage inventory turns, to make sure they're getting the product done, either built or ordered, sufficiently transferred between different branches or locations, based on how they have it set up, from transfer price, transfer rules. If you have a manufacturing facility here, a distribution facility here, and a retail facility, well, the manufacturing facility has to get it to the DC, get it to the retail store in the right time frame. And so really what MRP does is it looks at all the metrics in the system of the demand. And again, you can use historical demand, you can use sales forecast. It's really whatever's in the demand plan. It can also consider actual sales orders that may be coming in. And it lumps those two together, and it'll spit out and say, hey, based on what we're seeing, you need to order this product to make this product. And it can start 45, 90, 180 days out, depending on how long your organization's lead times are. So it's really around maximizing inventory, making sure you have the right product at the right time, and preventing those lovely things where you over order product and it just sits on shelves for years to come. So,
yeah, I guess a typical aspirations for a lot of customers we work for is like, let's throw it in day one. It's gonna tell us exactly how our supply chain and our supply planning is going to work. What is a typical workflow in MRP? Maybe call it kind of phase one. What works best, what does not work. Any kind of advantages, disadvantages to putting in the full kit and caboodle?
Yeah, so MRP, at least NetSuite's MRP, which we can speak very specifically about, there's certain things that it doesn't necessarily know. And I'll use something I've experienced with a variety of different organizations I've been associated with, that those that manufacture in Europe. Let's say you get supplies in Europe. Well, lots of places in Europe shut down for a month in the summer. So what I always tell people is MRP tells you it's a suggestion. It's a suggested work order, suggested purchase order. I think there are very few organizations in the country, most of those that are continuous manufacturing, which doesn't really, that's not the reality of a lot of that, chip manufacturers, NVIDIA, or whatever. Like, they're going to make as much as they can as fast as possible to get it off because they know they can sell it. Not every organization has infinite demand. And so what I typically tell people is you can load up a demand plan based on historical sales and use that to forecast out. You can have it decrement from the sales and the demand to kind of drive through. And you use those first couple of months to really hone in on, are my lead times correct? Well, we placed the purchase order on, March 25th, and it got here on April 25th, 30 days. Well, the lead time we had expected for that product was 15. Okay, well, why is that? Was this a one-off? So you really got to work on tweaking that. And that's where NetSuite can then start to auto-calculate those things. Say, well, you think it's 15 days, but it's really 25, right? And start to measure against that and hone it in. So it's really one of those kind of try and test out as you go. And I like to use it to make the suggestions, but then obviously there's got to be a person on the other end who looks at it and says, nah, this doesn't make sense. There's something going on here with the data. And it's one of those things, as we always talk about in ERP systems, garbage in, garbage out. How you set it up, how you have it configured is really going to drive how well it performs. And unfortunately, it does take a human. Like I said, in very few industries is demand always going this way, right? Demand is going to be ebbs and flows depending on seasonality, industry, interest rate performance. Something not even related to the industry, but interest rate go up. Heavy equipment manufacturers, that becomes more expensive. The parts that go into that, it's cascading effect through the supply chain that really has to be considered.
I want to ask, I know our organization has built quite a few advanced features as it relates to MRP. Could you maybe shed a little bit of light on what we've done to enhance that next mile, kind of the easier user acceptance?
Yeah, so some of it is just visualization. The manufacturing workbench in NetSuite is a bit limiting, and reporting off of that data can be cumbersome as well, particularly after the fact. NetSuite didn't really make MRP to be reportable, which is kind of not my favorite thing. They kind of should have considered that not everybody's going to want to see MRP data the way they see it. And they've got some views you can create, but it's very limited. You can't use a safe search, right? Everybody loves safe search in NetSuite or analytics workbook. Even if it's non-interactive, at least I can say, what am I planning to produce or order in the next 60, 90 days? How is that going to impact my financial forecast? Where am I seeing inventory spikes or inventory drop-offs? It just doesn't make it really easy to see that information without some complexity. So we've done some things around reporting there and visualizing different ways of seeing MRP data. One of the things we've also done is created a data repository. For any of the job shops that use it, you typically will spit out a couple of work orders. Well, what happens is you don't know what work order that was pegged to. Because in a job shop or make-to-order environment, there's a sales order, there's a work order, and that work order can spit out purchase orders. So you have this daisy chain, as I always call it, of effect. And if you're running that through MRP, it loses visibility without having to go into the workbench, find that work order. So we've created kind of a data repository that ties all the pegging data together that allows organizations to, it is a script, right? But we pull all that data together. So if we need to add fields, we can do that into the safe search. And the idea is we're populating a custom record that when MRP runs, it just refreshes itself. And so then they can say, here's what my pegging information is. This work order created this from this sales order created this work order. This work order created this work order. Because, in certain environments, you can have 5 work orders and 5 purchase order, all from one sales order, one line on one sales order. And so what we've done is provide visibility into those things.
And then I think bigger picture, when does it make sense as an organization? What typical thresholds do you see where you've done your demand, your supply planning in Excel, you're finally outgrowing QuickBooks or kind of a legacy application? When should you consider MRP?
The first time you make a big mistake. I mean, Excel is always one of those things, and I do stuff in Excel. I do financial forecasts in Excel. I do resource planning sometimes in Excel, where I need to move things around a lot. Once you get more stasis in your planning environment, it's a good time, in my opinion, to start turning it on, because you don't have to abide by it, right? You can always go manually create a work order for what you think is right, but it can start to make suggestions, and you can say, well, that's wrong. Then you say, why is it wrong? So it's one of those things that MRP is not something you just switch on and say, let it go. There needs to be human insight into what's going on in it to determine what levers need to be moved, safety stock, whatever it may be, how you do your ordering. Is it minimum order quantity, right? But NetSuite doesn't do economic order quantity, right? Like, how many do we have to order from this vendor type of thing? So understanding the reality of where NetSuite fits and what may have to be human interaction. As again, MRP will tell you to order one part from one vendor to meet one order. Well, it's a $10 part. They're not going to ship you a $10 part. They have a $1,000 minimum. So then you've got to think about, okay, well, we've got to add stuff to this. So there's always these nuances that come into play with it to understand your planning strategy.
Yeah, and as I think general populace starting to get excited about MRP, maybe dipping their toes in with NetSuite. Hoping you can share a little bit of just the experience and how your team with Stratus works. Let's say I'm interested in MRP. How do I go to you at Stratus and say, put it in, support me, train me? What's atypical for you guys?
So, we start with requirements, questions, lead times, process, make to order, make to stock, mix mode, reorder point items. Do you have stock items you always keep, like minimum order quantities? Well, you shouldn't run those through MRP because you're just going to reorder at certain intervals, right? So it's understanding the key business objectives with it, which I think with anything, you don't just do something because you can, you do it for a reason. Yeah, nobody implements NetSuite just because they want to. It's usually, hey, we need to improve processes. We need better visibility. We need advanced features. We need the ability to integrate, whatever it is. You're doing it for a reason. So why do you want to implement MRP? Okay, you want to reduce your inventory levels by X. Okay, so there's a goal. And how do we get there, right? So these are the things we need to do to achieve that goal. And if MRP is the right answer, okay, here's what we need to do from an MRP perspective. Here's the information we need from you around lead times, so we populate that data and we start to go through testing. And we start with your most common use case, and then we talk about accepting, right? And we say, here's how it works. Does this work? Is this going to help? What is the benefit of this? Well, it's going to shrink our inventory hold time by 7 days. So yeah, we'll turn that much faster with inventory. Therefore, we're turning capital, our working capital ratio improves for how long we're taking cash into inventory back into cash type of strategy. So that's kind of how I always look at it, is there's got to be an objective or a goal set. Just doing it because you can. Like, what improvements are you looking for? What visibility, what reporting? There's always got to be some sort of backing objective and goal to be achieved.
And lastly, I think just from overall enhancements to the organization, touching on just general goals, what you typically see when organizations come to us for MRP. Can you maybe shed a little bit more light? You noted inventory turns, cash on hand. What are some of the critical impacts that an organization may see as a result of taking on MRP?
Better visibility into their supply chain, understanding fluctuations in inventory patterns, right? A lot of this is exposed in the item 360 for planned work orders, planned purchase orders, those types of things. And giving organizations a little bit more power in how they manage their supply chain versus reactive. Right. So one of the biggest things in a lot of times in supply chain is, oh, we missed that part on this work order or sales order. Now we've got to expedite the purchase order to get it here, right? $100 part, you're going to pay $500 in shipping to get it here, maybe, for example, and it erodes margin, right? When you're having to expedite things, you're not going through their typical 7 to 10 day shipping process. They have to expedite it. They're going to charge a fee for that most of the time. That eats into your margin. So then you're talking about like, okay, now our financial performance is going down because we're having to expedite. So you want to cut down on those types of processes, those types of things. I've always been a fan of it because it's a demand-based, driver-based system, similar to like we think about FP&A tools, right? With how we approach like what happens if our average selling price goes up $1? Okay, what if our cost of goods, raw material goes up a percentage point? What does that do? So MRP is really looking ahead to say, based on what you've told me, here's what I think you should do. And so the human can then come in and say, this is right, this is right, this is right. This seems off. Let me go investigate why this is. So instead of being reactionary and waiting until you're right at the cusp of that outlier and you're having to try to then dig in and say, shit, we should order it yesterday, like trying to determine ahead of time, it's a more proactive approach to managing your supply chain.
Yeah. I think very well said, and certainly appreciate you spending some time with us today talking about how we can better utilize MRP specifically to NetSuite. To our listeners, please feel free to reach out to both Glenn and myself if you have any questions. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Louis.